Hello, today we are going to be talking about paraphrasing and quoting and plagiarism, and then we're going to look at a sample of a works cited page. And we're going to be looking at this because the next step in the research process is working on your note cards, and you're going to be using direct quotes and paraphrasing in your note cards. So I just want to make sure that we all have a really clear understanding. Even though we've talked about it in class, I also want to make sure we have a clear understanding. And this video is going to help you because if you forget something or you're unsure about something, you can go back to it as many times as you need it and use it as a reference. Paraphrasing and quoting. Paraphrasing is expressing someone else's ideas in your own words. Quoting is providing the exact words of someone else. Either way, you need to credit your sources. Paraphrasing. When you paraphrase, you restate the ideas in a source using your own words. And we have some steps to follow here. The first step says, read the parts you want to paraphrase and understand it as a whole. That goes without saying. Whenever you are going to use a piece of information, you need to understand it. And paraphrasing in and of itself will help you deepen your understanding of whatever piece of information you're looking at. Step 2. Paraphrase sections, not sentences. Put the main idea of the section in your own words. Writing your own sentences to show your understanding. While I understand the importance of taking a chunk of information and pulling out or extracting that main idea and putting it in your own words, for purposes of our research, there may be times when you do just want to use a sentence on its own. For example, a particular statistic that you would like to use to help support whatever your topic happens to be. Maybe that statistic is in a sentence or maybe only 2 sentences, and that's fine to go ahead and just use a couple sentences. It really does depend upon the information that you're looking at and what you plan to use it for. So while I agree that it is best to look at chunks of information, there will be exceptions to that where you will be possibly just looking at a sentence or 2. Okay, number 3, check for fairness. Make sure your paraphrase reflects the writer's original intention. In other words, you don't want to look at a chunk of information and then maybe take out the middle section and just keep the beginning and the end, especially if that middle section is helping to deliver the message, whatever that message happens to be. So you really do need to make sure that what you're saying in your paraphrase, in your own words, that it does reflect exactly what that writer was intending to say in his or her message. And then, of course, cite your sources. And we will talk more about that in a bit. Okay, moving on, and we are to quoting now. Quote only passages that express an idea especially well, and then make sure you quote the exact words of the person. And I would just like to add to this that when you are using direct quotes word for word, it's very important to use direct quotes that are powerful, that the language that is used expresses and evokes such a response in the audience that you know that if you were to write it on your own in your own words, you would not have that same impact on your audience. Okay, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be able to take a quote from a text and paraphrase it, put it in your own words. But there are times when the author's words are more powerful than your own. For example, thinking about Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, he is such an eloquent speaker and his words evoke such a response in the audience that would be an example of taking part of that speech and using it directly as he wrote it and as he spoke it to his audience. Okay, let's go through the list here. Set off quotations, so use quotation marks correctly. Again, this is something that we talked about in class, and you have the sample note cards and you have those quotations you have those quotation marks that show you how to do that already in that sample, so you don't have to worry about that. We've went over that, and you have the model. Number 2, check the original. Make sure you have quoted exactly. Number 3, keep quotations short. Don't allow them to overwhelm your own ideas. And this is true with any type of writing that you're doing. If you're using a quote, or even if you're using paraphrasing, which is still taking somebody else's ideas and just putting it in your own words, it's very important to be true to your own self in your own writing, and the audience wants to hear from you and your ideas. So while you are using other people's ideas to help you get your message across, it's still important for you to show your own writing style and your voice in your piece. Number 4, introduce quotations and or follow them with comments. So you don't want to just throw a quote out there without giving some context prior to that, and then explaining it a bit even afterwards. Okay, so that's all about the context. And then number 5, cite your sources. And down here is our helpful hints. You cite sources to give credit to other thinkers. You also cite sources so the readers will know where you found your information. Here are 3 ways to cite your sources. Name the source and writer in the text, and here is our example. In Life on a Giant Magnet, and that's the piece where this comes from, the title. Billy Taylor, there is the author, points out that the molten mantle on the earth makes it a giant magnet. Use MLA, parenthetical, reference, and a works cited page. And again, we will talk about that in a bit. And I know we've talked about this in class, but just to be clear, the acronym MLA stands for Modern Language Association. Okay? The molten mantle of the earth makes it a giant magnet. And so we have another example there, but instead here in this parenthetical citation, we just have the last name, right? Bill Taylor here, we have the last name. Whereas up in this example, we have the author's full name, but we also have the title of the piece where this information is coming from. And our next little square bulleted item here is, if your work and your source are both online, provide a hyperlink. I am not requiring my students to do that, so you don't have to worry about that. When you have your note cards, you have your source, and that's where you're going to put where you found the information along with the author if you happen to find the author's name. Sometimes, depending upon the website that you're using, you might not actually find the author's name. So it really just depends on the website in which you're looking at. For example, if you were looking at like the CDC website, you're probably not going to find an author. It's just going to be, via the CDC. Okay, and so this last example here just gives the information, and this is linked. This is a linked hyperlink, but again, I'm not expecting that, so I'm just going to move past that quickly. Okay, avoiding plagiarism. Want to hear a joke I just came up with? You ask a friend. After you tell it, your friend cracks up, but then turns to someone else and says, want to hear a joke I just came up with? What kind of friend is that, taking credit for your joke? That's plagiarism or stealing. Now imagine your friend giving you credit. Want to hear a joke that, insert said friend's name, came up with? That's different. It's almost an honor. It shows that your friend likes your joke well enough to share it and give you credit for it. Avoiding plagiarism in your writing is just as important. All you have to do is give credit to the sources of the ideas that you use. And we're going to learn more about that by looking at an article, okay, and then some examples of plagiarism that go along with that particular article. And here is the article, and yes, I'm going to quickly read this to you. The article below talks about some of the effects of aging on the human body. After reading it, note the examples of plagiarism on the next page. Old age isn't for sissies, and you can see, looking right here, that the author of this article is Frank Bell. The famous actress Betty Davis once said, "Old age isn't for sissies." But what effects does aging have on human beings? The slow march of time takes its toll on our skin, our hair, and the very shape of our bodies. Aging and skin. Over time, muscles grow weaker and the skin over the muscles begin to sag. It also loses elasticity, so that once tight skin becomes loose or wrinkled. These factors, combined with a gradual thinning of skin, makes for the changes we often see in aging faces. Bags under the eyes, wrinkling beside the eyes and mouth, dangling and double chins, and a translucent quality that makes skin look mottled. Sun damage accelerates these processes. Aging and hair. Hair is colored by a pigment called melanin, which is produced by the hair follicles. As follicles age, they produce less melanin, and hair slowly loses its color. Black hair may go to salt and pepper, to gray, then to silver, and finally white. Meanwhile, especially in men, the long-term effects of the hormone testosterone cause hair to recede from the head and to crop up in unwanted places such as the ears and back. Aging and the body. Aging reduces muscle mass and increases fat storage. As a result, our shoulders get narrower and our waistlines get rounder. Time also ravages the skeletal system, reducing calcium content, especially in women. In fact, it is not uncommon for people over the age of 40 to lose a centimeter of height every 10 years. So a couple things I'd like to point out in this article before we look at some examples of plagiarism. Again, I've already pointed out the author. Notice in a short piece like this, such as this article, the titles are in quotation marks. For longer pieces of text, for example, a novel, a book, they would be italicized. If you are handwriting it, then you would underline it. One thing I want to point out is in the very beginning, we see here that Frank Bell gives credit to Betty Davis for this quote, "Old age isn't for sissies," and you can see how that's done. The famous actress Betty Davis once said, note the comma, okay, you want to put a comma when you're giving some context like this, when what we're doing is giving it a tag, right? Giving this particular quote a name tag, so to speak. And then we have the quote, okay? And notice that the quotation mark here comes after the period, okay? Another thing I'd like to point out is, and maybe I can make this just a little bit bigger so you can see this better. There we go. I would like to point out that the image here is titled Old and Young, and it says photo by Mandy Godby here, okay? So within this article, even the image here has been given credit. So Frank Bell is recognizing that this is not his image, this was not his photo, it was by Mandy Godby here, and he's giving credit where credit is due to avoid plagiarism. Okay, I'm just looking at my time, and this particular online recording platform that I'm using only allows me 15 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop with this portion of the video, and if you need to take a break, give yourself a mental break or just a little bit of a break before moving on, you should do that. So when we next come back, it'll be part 2 of this video talking about paraphrasing, quotes, plagiarism, and we're excited. Okay? Thank you.